All right, I call the council meeting to order and no one is excused. We need an adoption of the minutes from our last meeting on April the 8th. Anne-Marie moves. Questions? Changes? Nope. Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to a call for post-agenda items. We have any post-agenda items? Clarence?
I'm not sure if there will be any discussion, but reading from what I see in the paper, there's lots of discussion about some of the dollars coming to number one rest stops, which happen to be in the county of Newell, and some of our friendly municipal partners have had some comments, and I think I would like to have a bit of a clarification what we know about all this, and if we could put that at, if there's any more information that we might have. I think only one of them is in the county of Newell, from what I understand. But I certainly would like to have a discussion about that.
Okay, I'll add that to the agenda and post agenda. I'd also like to add an in-camera legal. Any others? Matt?
We'll have a land in camera and legal in camera.
All right. Any others? Could we have an adoption of the agenda then, please? Kelly moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We're at question period notice of motion, and Todd, do you have anything right now from anyone?
No, Madam Reeve, I do not. And like always, if anything comes up, I'll be sure to interject when I can.
Okay, thank you for that. And because we are really backing up delegations today, I'm going to move on. And just so our RCMP group here gathered know, we have a 10:30 delegation that we have not started yet. And so I'm thinking that probably 11:30 might be more reasonable for the RCMP delegation. Ariana, did we have anyone at 11:30 as well? Oh my, or is that would make it better? Pardon?
No, there's no one at 11:30. Sorry about that.
So I think that would work, just so there.
Amanda has her hand up.
Oh, Amanda.
Irv and I don't mind waiting if you would like to move through your RCMP delegation. If Sebastian has something else going on, we can accommodate whatever. Okay,
RCMP folks, then if we looks as though we'll let you start off then, and thank you Amanda and Irv for that. I'm sure it's exciting to sit through an RCMP report anyhow, so maybe it'll save you some time at a later point, Sebastian. And so we do have someone new with us today, I'm thinking perhaps. Gord, I'm going to go to you for an introduction. I'm Molly Douglas. I'm the Reeve of the County of Newell, and I represent the area around GEM. and Finnegan and Duck Lake, which is primarily looked after by the Bassano detachment. But welcome to our council meeting, and maybe I will go around and just have councillors introduce themselves so you get a bit of an idea of who's who in our group. Okay, would that work for you, Gord? And then we'll let you introduce yourself and go ahead. So I'll move, okay. So I'll move to Div 1, please.
Okay, Clarence Amulung, I represent the area around Rolling Hills, and which is Division 1.
Div 2.
Huey Callum, good to see you again. We've met at Safe Communities.
Yes, good morning, Huey.
If I disappear, it's because my computer screen just went crazy, but hopefully you can still hear me. Div 3.
Anne-Marie Phillipson, and I represent Patricia Millison Dinosaur Park area.
Div 4.
I'm Wayne Hammergan. I do represent Scandia, Rainier, and the Bow City area.
Div 5.
Hey, welcome to our meeting. I'm Tracy Fife from Division 5, and I represent the area that's west and south around the city of Brooks. So that includes the Castles area, Lake Newell Resort area. So that's part of my division.
Great.
Thank you. Div 6.
Morning. I'm Kelly Chrisman. I'm from the west side of the county around Bassano.
I'll just go on. Molly disappeared. My name is Ellen Undra, and I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary.
Good morning.
Zong, and I represent the Div 8, which is around the village of Dutchess.
Thank you.
And as mentioned, I'm Div 9, and so Div 10, our final councillor, Lionel.
Morning, Lionel Just from Division 10, which is north and east of Brooks.
Good morning.
Take it away.
Okay, did you want me to do an introduction, or did you want me to go right into my report?
No, I'd like to hear a little bit about, Bruce just vanished. And I just wondered where you came from, Gord, so we know a little bit about you. And what is the update on Bruce as well?
Well, so I was brought in, I came in around the middle of, just a little bit after the middle of February, as the acting detachment commander. I was actually one of the applicants for the job at the time. And so as luck would have it, I just found out in March that I actually was successful in getting the job as the detachment commander of Brooks Detachment. So that's something that I'm very pleased about. Bruce is not currently on duty. He's still in the area, but he's currently off duty. So I originally, so prior to coming to Brooks, I was in Tabor Detachment. I was the detachment commander down there. I've got, I'm working on my 21st year of service with the RCMP, 13 years with the Canadian Forces prior to that. So getting pretty close to that 35-year mark, although I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon in terms of retirement. I've been through a wide variety of detachments. I started off in Lloydminster way back from my first detachment. Decided to take a little break from there, went down to Pontiac, Saskatchewan for a few years. Got promoted up to Vermilion as a corporal. From Vermilion, I went to Redcliffe, and while I was in Redcliffe, I had the opportunity to be the acting detachment commander of Bow Island Detachment. I was the acting operations NCO for Brooks back in 2017. for about 6 months. And then from there, I became the acting detachment commander down in Tabor, where I eventually got that job as well. So I've kind of floated around quite a bit, as you can tell. Again, very happy to be here in the Brooks area. Have purchased a house. We're going to be moving in May. Happy to say we're living in the out in the rural area out in the county. Found ourselves a nice little acreage out there, so anxiously awaiting our move date. And it's very nice to meet everybody here this morning.
Thank you. Welcome to our community, and that's great that you're living in the county of Newell too. So we'll let you carry on with your report, whatever you want to highlight.
Okay, and so hoping you can bear with me. This is my first time presenting before this particular council, so I'm not entirely sure how the format has been for you in the past, but what I'll do is I'll just kind of give you a little brief overview of the last 3 months, and then we can go on from there. And then I believe Sebastian will be presenting after me. If I would say if Sebastian has anything pressing on his plate, I would be more than happy to let him have my my spot as first up. It's up to Sebastian.
Actually, that would be beneficial, as I do have a statement at noon, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working from home today, so I understand the pressures of policing. So if Sebastian has something he needs to get to, I'd be more than happy to let him go up first. Certainly if that's okay with Reeve and Council.
Absolutely. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you. Welcome, Sebastian.
Welcome, Molly. First, thank you, Amanda, for giving us the space. I appreciate it, and thank you, Gord. So I'm gonna, if you have noticed, we have now changed the way we report our APP into a standardized form. I still sent you guys the old one because this was before it did change. So I'm gonna kind of go back and forth. I do like the new standardized form. I think it gives you a little bit more breakdown of crime. So I think it's a step in the right direction. So as you know, the fourth quarter is January through March. We during those 3 months, we had 14 youth engagement sessions, as you guys had chose community engagement as your priority. We have done 816 community engagement and crime reduction programs. So what that is I think I spoke about it before, is we had a rural crime strategy, and the last part of it was engagement with our rural residents. So we had Constable Andre Bassano, who went house to house, and every rural resident in our areas delivered a brochure so they could see who their members were, as well as what are the stats and crime that's going on in their area. We also informed them what crime mapping was, and it was quite well received. We gave them signs to help prevent crime, as well as magnets. We still have another 500 residents to go, so we're hoping to finish that in the next couple of months. Bassano crime test has been really good. I'd like to thank Kendra and Brooks Attachment for helping to partner with that, as I don't have to upload the video as much to my actual own account, and it actually reaches more of the County of Newell residents. So I think that is really beneficial. We had 6 reading programs. For January to March, we had 4 impaired drivers. We gave 102 tickets to motorists driving over 140 kilometers an hour. As I stated before, for us, we are giving a little bit of leeway under that, just because of what's going on with the COVID crisis. We did 141 proactive patrols. As discussed, that's at least 45 minutes in your rural areas. We did 55 hotspot night patrols. As you know, last year we did copper was our priority. This year we are going to go into businesses as well for crime reduction. We had 2 sudden deaths and 4 MHA transports. Really excited that we had a 33% decrease in that from last quarter. As you know, we have seen an increase in that. We did have 35 charges laid in person, serious person crimes. We have had a huge increase in that, and we've explained that in the past. A large amount of these charges that we're showing from January to March are from one file. We have had 4, unfortunately, more sexual assaults recently, but that will be on the next report. So we are investigating a large child pornography file. We have over 20 victims. I won't be discussing it any further other than the SOC has been arrested, but for the privacy of our victims, we won't be doing a news release or anything further than that. I can tell you has been arrested, and the investigation continues as we will be looking to see if there's any more. Our two-prong approach of night patrols, hotspot identifications, like we explained, that's with us finding trends where the areas are so we can actually do patrols in those areas, has helped to decrease break-in enters by 50% from the third quarter. So we are trending so far in the right direction. As you know, we had a huge decrease in the mental health. I'm going to go into this new form, which I really like how it splits it down for you guys. It's so in 2019 for the entire year and 2020, we had, in 2019, we had for property crime, we had 34 reports. 137 reports of property crime such as break-in enters. And this year, 2020, we reduced it to 96. So we had a 30% reduction in property crime, which I'm very happy for, and we're trending in the right direction. I look forward to hopefully decreasing that by another 20% based on our intelligence sharing with crew, which, you know, as I stated, that works out of Airdrie, as well as our partnerships with different intelligence branches. That is kind of what is going on for Bassano for that quarter. I'll be presenting the next quarter for the first quarter. Other than that, things are doing really good. The safe communities has really helped us quite a bit, so that's been awesome. And I look forward to any questions or concerns.
Thank you, Sebastian. Any questions? Don't see any hands up, I don't think. Excellent.
Well, that's a good thing, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, all good news, and it's, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to Gord then.
Okay, good morning, Reeve councillors. I'm here this morning to present to you the stats from January to March for County of Newell, so for a rural area outside the city of Brooks. So from January to March of 2021, Brooks Detachment members responded to 443 rural calls for service. A total of 70 prisoners were lodged in our detachment cells, and there were 88 provincial criminal record checks completed during that time. We had a couple of fairly notable events that occurred during that period as well. Notably, on March the 11th, we had a situation on the highway where a peace officer advised he was roadside with a GMC Yukon. Vehicle was occupied by a registered owner and the suspect. Our members attended to assist, and the suspect forcibly removed the owner from the vehicle before fleeing from our members. The victim was dragged nearly 50 meters by the fleeing vehicle. Members pursued temporarily before having the pursuit terminated. The victim was taken to Brooks Hospital with minor injuries. A warrant was obtained for the suspect for robbery, dangerous operation of motor vehicle, and flight from police. He was arrested later on by Edmonton Police Service, and that matter is currently before the courts. Then on March 29th, as I'm sure many of you remember, we had a fairly bad weather day that day. Road conditions deteriorated rather quickly, so our members attended to a collision on Highway 1 involving approximately 50 to 75 motor vehicles. Collisions were caused due to extremely poor weather conditions in the region. There were no life-threatening injuries reported. There were a couple of fairly severe injuries, but nothing of a life-threatening nature per se. Additional members were called in to deal with the situation. Basically, we called in as many members as we had cars for. A reception center was set up at one of our local hotels. There was excellent cooperation between the RCMP, fire department, EMS, hotel staff, basically all of our community partners that were involved in that. I'm going to get into our stats if there's no early questions for me. So I'll just draw your attention, and I'm probably going to tweak the way I deliver the stats to council, you know, certainly moving forward, find an approach that works best. And certainly if previous commanders have had an approach that you like, please let me know. So criminal code offenses, the first one does not look good, just saying. The optics are terrible on that one. Persons crimes have jumped 222%. That is explained by a rapid, or a bit of a rapid jump there in sexual assaults. Now, I did some digging into that. So in 2020, in the same time frame, we had one sexual assault, and then in 2021, of course, now we're up to 10. And a reason for that is a couple of those were introduced during kind of unrelated investigations, so domestic violence investigation or whatnot. And during the course of that investigation or the statement, the victim makes an allegation of a sexual assault. A couple of those were quite historical in nature, meaning that they happened a while back. A couple others were reported, and then we lost the cooperation of the victim and whatnot. I believe at the end of the day, we were able to lay charges on a couple of those sex assaults and put those before the courts. So that would explain the increase in those. You know, certainly when you go from 1 to 10, it's, you know, the percentage of increase is going to look quite drastic. Property crime, on the other hand, is down by 30%. With other criminal code, and that is things like offensive weapons offenses, disturbing the peace, fail to comply with conditions and breaches. We've had 4 fewer this period over the same period last year. So if we look at the bottom of that sheet, and actually that the first 3 I mentioned to you does account for a 5% increase in total criminal code offenses. Fairly modest increase overall. Property crime wise, break and enters, we had 7 fewer instances this year as opposed to last. Theft of motor vehicle, we had 1 more this year, and theft under 5,000, we had 3 fewer incidents this year than we did during the same period last year. Are there any questions on that?
I don't see any questions for that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I mean, and you've been provided with the other statistics. What I like about this crime gauge is that it's kind of a nice way to highlight some of the more important parts of those statistics, and kind of puts it into a nice, easier to read format, I guess. And knowing that you've been provided with the 5-year crime stats, were there any questions from anybody regarding those 5-year statistics?
Questions, councillors? No, don't see any, Gord.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll go into a bit of a kind of a state of the detachment. So as some of you may be aware, over the last several months, we had struggled with some staffing shortages. We've been running a little bit short kind of on both sides of the detachment, both municipal and rural. I'm happy to say that we're getting back to a state of normalcy. So we just had a new member arrive from depot and start at the beginning of April. We have another new member arriving in early May from depot as well. And we just got notified that we have another new member coming in from depot arriving in early June. So those 3 members coming in are going to be a big help to our frontline members. Both myself and our management at Southern Alberta District have been fairly proactive in trying to fill all of our vacancies kind of early on after my arrival. We also had one of our members who was selected to transfer out, and he has volunteered to cancel that transfer, or at least put it on hold for now. So that's also going to help us in the long run. We have a plainclothes position upstairs. We ran a competition for that, and we have a new member coming into our GIS unit at a date to be determined, and I don't have a name for that member just yet. So that's a plainclothes position, kind of a more of a specialized investigative unit. So that's pretty much where we stand right now. It's been a fairly steady, fairly busy 3 months on the rural side. Our members are getting out there quite frequently, making patrols through the area. Our APP this year, moving forward, we have several focuses. In no particular order, we have traffic enforcement is going to be one of our priorities. Community engagement is going to be a priority. Drug enforcement will be one of the priorities. And look at me, I have forgotten number 4 that I chose. Yeah, like I said, we do have those 4 priorities. And when I remember that 4th one, I'll let you know. It's been a bit of a whirlwind over the last couple of months there. So I'm in the process of just kind of finalizing our initiatives for the new fiscal year. So are there any questions on any of those items?
Gord, is depot in full operation these days with COVID considerations?
Well, it's not, my understanding is it's not in, it's not functioning at pre-COVID levels just yet. Certainly they have, I think, ramped it up a little bit from earlier on in the pandemic. But I'm not sure exactly how many troops are going through. I don't know if Sebastian has that number. I see he's still on there.
Sebastian, you have to unmute. Now you've disappeared and we still can't hear you. There you go.
Nothing?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, I work with someone who's actually a corporal there in depot, and he said it's about 60% capacity right now, just to keep everyone safe. With depot, it's very close quarters. That's not an official number. That's what he said from when he was there before COVID as well.
That's awesome. Thanks, Sebastian. I figured somebody would know what the actual numbers are, quite close. So yeah, it's definitely not pre-COVID numbers, but certainly it appears to be getting back up there, which is great to see.
Yeah, and it's good to see that you're trying to keep our members all in place, ones that we are supposed to have. Hubie had a question, and Hubie's on our Rural Crime Watch Board and Rural Crime Prevention things. So Hubie, go ahead.
Thank you, Molly. And that was going to be my comment on the visibility you guys are getting out there in the rural communities, and I think that's what's helping bring down the rural crime, down 30%. So really glad to see that, and just want to say keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Speaking of good work, I don't know if we CC'd the letter that we wrote back to your K Division commander guy regarding a meeting. Both Brooks and RCMP had offered to help us get a meeting if there was anything we wanted to discuss with K Division. And so what we did do is send a letter to them saying that we are very pleased with our relationships and work that we have ongoing with our 2 detachments as a county. So just so you are aware of that, and we're very aware that the province is talking quite, or has been in the past. I don't know if going forward they'll continue the talk about a Alberta police force or not, but our support, and I think most of our rural members and our urbans are not really wanting to engage in a discussion like that at the present time. We feel that any problems that we encounter from either side should be able to be talked out and discussed and worked on. And certainly our community engagement and your community visibility is something that we all have enjoyed in the last few years. So as Hubie said, keep it up. Any other questions? All right, we'll go to Kendra, and then we'll finish up with our own peace officer report, and I see we're at 11:26. So Kendra, if you could just maybe mention if there's anything not on your report or a highlight or something that we don't have a lot of time left.
I won't keep you guys for mine. Basically, yeah, everything that I wanted to report on is in my report. The kind of a summary of results from the survey we did in the county. We had great engagement from the county. We've been meeting with representatives from some of the different smaller municipalities about engagement over the summer and stuff like that. So that's really, really great. And yeah, basically everything that's in my report is everything that I was going to touch on. The only thing that isn't in there is this report is already out of date because we have over 40,000 TikTok followers now. Only thing that's out of date on there. But yeah, everything that I wanted to mention is definitely on my report. So if anyone has any questions about that,
Well, bigger numbers is good news. So we'll always go with good news. Seeing no questions. Oh, Kelly.
I'll ask a quick question. So, Kendra, your mandate or your area that you cover, does it include Bassano area?
yes, so it's the Brooks and Newell Safe Communities. So even though we work out of the Brooks detachment and the Brooks and Bassano RCMP jurisdictions are separate, it's nice that Safe Communities encompasses the whole county, which is why we get to work with both detachments. But yeah, it involves everybody.
Because I noticed in your poster outlay and that sort of thing, you didn't come this far west with your outlay of information. So that's what prompted the question.
Can I ask which information?
On your report, under methods of advertisement.
Oh, okay. So there's actually a reason for that. That's a real quick answer. Basically, the only reason that we didn't reach out into the Bassano jurisdiction for it was because Safe Communities was basically acting as basically facilitating the survey for the Brooks detachment. And because Bassano had already done their APPs and was addressing it in their own way, we didn't want to step on their toes. So we were just, for that specific thing, we were just trying to get people in the Brooks jurisdiction. We ended up getting input from Bassano anyways, which was always good. But yeah, for that thing specifically, it was just the Brooks jurisdiction. But other than that, when we actually do initiatives coming from Safe Communities and not just facilitating them for the detachment, they include everybody.
Thank
That's actually
you.
a really good question.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And the position of Safe Communities coordinator is funded by both Brooks and the County of Newell. So, okay, John, we'll move to the county report.
Morning, Council and Madam Reeve. Yes, and I know we're pressed a little bit for time, so I will make this quick. My council report is for January-March. During this quarter, our department focused on intersection safety, distracted driving, and seatbelts as per the traffic safety calendar. Our department issued 91 tickets and 63 warnings during this time period. There was 37 investigations conducted during this time. Our department was involved in community engagement activities. These activities were participating in social media, where a community peace officer explained our role in the community, The other activity that our community peace officer was involved in was discussing for a college paper the role policing services have within the community. There were joint operations conducted with the fire department, RCMP, and provincial sheriffs. Our department assisted in traffic control in a significant weather event that resulted in numerous motor vehicle collisions, including our own patrol vehicle. And I will add, I guess, Sergeant Yetman just mentioned it, it's before the courts, also involved in a serious traffic matter. So I'll leave that where that's at. Our department will be transitioning also for tickets to an e-ticketing solution from the present paper copies. Also, our department continues to utilize the speed signs to help educate the motorists and to collect data when needed on traffic patterns relating to speeding. And then again, obviously enclosed is a report providing further information on tickets versus warnings issued by our department for the county only and on the case files that we investigated. And that's my report.
Any questions? Thank you, John.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. And thank you, Kendra, Sebastian, and Gord. Gord, you got off lucky today because sometimes we have lots of questions and other times we don't. So everyone take care in the next few months and weeks, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Council, we'll move back on our agenda to our Bassano item, which is item 8.1 on our agenda, the ICF recreation update from Bassano. So welcome, Amanda and Irv.
Hi.
And I guess we'll just let you start your presentation. I think you know everyone around the table, so
I'll start out a little bit here, Molly. Thanks for that. I just want to thank everybody for their time and welcome us in for this. And my thoughts on recreation is that it's very, very important to me, and as well as most of the other all the other council for that matter. And I think this pandemic in the last year has kind of brought that to the forefront, how much the need is for it. So we're hoping, and we have a history of collaboration with the county as well. So we're hoping this will all just kind of continue. And Amanda's gone to a great deal of trouble authoring this thing, and she's done a great job on it. So the main purpose of this report is it's threefold. It's to provide an update on last year's, the 2020 recreation outcomes, operating and capital, and to introduce our new Town of Bassano Recreation and Leisure Master Plan, and lastly to provide an update on what's upcoming 2021 recreation objectives. Saying all that, I'm just going to turn it over to Amanda now because she's the author of this, and she's the one that's going to answer all the hard questions. So I think most of you know me, and those who don't, hi there.
Thanks, Irv, and thank you to both of you for your flexibility this morning. Really appreciated that.
No problem.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, thanks. You know, we missed you in person this time, so we'll do our best to make sure that we've answered your questions virtually. And that's the reason why this package is so aggressive, for lack of a better word, if you had time to read through the 52 pages. And I'm getting a lot of feedback on this end, so I'm just going to pause it and see if we've got two microphones on. That's better. Okay. Can everybody hear clearly? Great. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to go through the 2020 recreation updates so you can see what we achieved last year. I am not going to read this report verbatim. I'm sure that you'll have questions out of it that we're happy to go through together. So basically what we had summarized here is that the outcome of the Recreation Funding Committee in 2020 appears to be quite successful. So this was the first year that the program was actually launched with grants to the recreation user groups. So as you can see from that $50,000 contribution that was equally contributed by the two communities, $41,000 was distributed out to six of the user groups in the community, and some recreation and leisure occurred last year in and around the pandemic. The summary that you'll see in the first table summarized the applications that were received. And I'm not sure, Molly, had you and Kelly presented information to your council regarding the Recreation Funding Committee over the past year? Or is this new information for everybody?
I would think it's new. Kelly,
okay,
correct?
Okay, well, with that, did we want to spend a couple minutes going through those applications just so you know how the program unfolded, or did you get enough from reading the summary?
Maybe we'll just leave it if anyone has any questions. It's pretty clear the way it's been laid out in the chart, that who applied and then who took the money, and that amount awarded, Amanda, doesn't mean yet that it's been all used up, right?
Right, actually, and it was all used up. So it was, the bowling club didn't spend $200. So other than that, we're carrying forward $9,200 to the 2021 recreation pot. So there's roughly $60,000 that could be distributed in 2021. So everybody did achieve their application outcomes.
Anyone have any questions from council? No?
Okay. Very good then. So as a reminder, last year we had went through a 4-year capital plan where we had looked at different outcomes for recreation facilities in Bassano based on an infrastructure master plan that the town had completed in 2018 from MPE. So what we've summarized here is to show that all the projects except for one were completed last year, and the cost was $13,500 to do that. We received, or we gained a lot of efficiencies because a lot of the labor was done internally and then just competitive bidding through our local vendors. So the projects that were done at the outdoor pool, the laterals and the filters were all replaced at the pool. There were 7 of them. We replaced all of the water slide stairs and repaired them. And then we also completed the deteriorated floors and change room walls at the facility. So I've included pictures here just so that you could see the before and after. And the wall mount boilers were not completed last year, just simply due to timelines. So that's occurring now as we speak. But overall, I mean, we had budgeted $35,000 and completed the work for $13,500. So that's always nice to see. So in addition to the Recreation Funding Committee and then the capital upgrades, a lot of time was spent in 2020 establishing new working relationships with all of the user groups in Bassano. As you've seen later on in this report, there are a number of community user groups in town, and basically since 2019, moving into 2021 now, we've had to establish a relationship and framework with our user groups. So rather than saying you have the facility and you're independent on your own, how can we start working together more collaboratively? And fortunately and unfortunately with the pandemic, that just opened up new communication lines. So we've had a dedicated member of the administrative team along with members of council working one-on-one with our user groups for the past year. And Irv could probably attest to the success that has been. Now, rather than people dreading the town calling them, they are phoning us asking for information, and we can empower them to move on with their organizations. So that's been a huge success for everybody involved in the projects. Overall, most of the facilities were closed in 2021, as we have summarized here for everybody to see in the second chart on page 3. However, we did change around programming in the community with the user groups, and a lot of craft kits were delivered to family households. There were outdoor music festivals, the golf course was open, and there was movement of people throughout the community. But this is also then reflected in the reduced operating costs last year. Did anybody have any questions on what you had seen regarding programming up to this point? Nope. Okay. And then further, I believe most of County Council is aware that the town of Bassano did allocate a portion of its most operating funds to the recreation and culture groups. So 78,000 was distributed out, and this was a one-time emergency relief payment. Most of these funds really went to offset the cost of utilities without any user fees in and out of those facilities. Council chose not to do they decided not to require substantial input from the user groups at that time in an application process to access these funds. We did have a collaborative meeting with a couple of the user groups that were operating the facilities, such as the curling and the golf club, or not the golf club, sorry, the arena. And they were losing upwards of $7,000 per month in utilities with nobody being in the facility. So it just made sense for council to provide that contribution to the user groups to keep them moving and operating this year. And again, this is part of the work that has been done to establish those positive working relationships. The feedback that has come back to council has been very appreciative at this point. So that's basically a snapshot of what happened for recreation and leisure in 2020 and how that impacts what we have worked on behalf of the town and the county. Finally, as a strategic plan rewrite in September of last year, council bumped up their priority for the development of a recreation and leisure master plan under their intent of bridging the recreation gap. So we have been working on and have now completed a recreation and leisure master plan for the town of Bassano that we're going to be presenting to you this afternoon, or this morning, I should say, as the framework for how we see recreation and leisure moving forward in the community. So in part 2 of this presentation, there's a lot of background information here as to how and why recreation and leisure came to be what it is today, and how we're building off of our 3-pronged strategic approach in Bassano, which is beautify, build, and benefit. The recreation and leisure master plan falls under the build and benefit component of our strategic framework. And getting us to this point, we've had to do complete internal restructuring, governance restructuring, simplifying all of our development permit processes to attract investment and support local investment. We've changed all of our how we establish and work on relationships with stakeholders. We've done multi-year capital planning that are now 100% cash funded reserves, which we did not have before. We're working on an economics plan, and now we're back to the people side of things. So this was not something that came up overnight that we needed to develop. There has been a process in place for the past 2.5 years to get us to where we are now. So without further ado, really what we want to share with you is that to us, recreation and leisure is about making ideas happen in the community. And to do that, we have to empower our volunteers, and we need to ensure that there are funds available with accountability back from all of the parties that are invested in the program. So the initial stages of implementing this recreation and leisure master plan is, well, there's 3 stages to implementation. The first part is going to be an engagement and collaboration with our existing user groups, and that will allow us to negotiate and update all of the user agreements because most of them are expired. And that's going to define, how they're operating, what it looks like, how we can continue operating these facilities, what kind of supports need to be in place from the town to ensure that these facilities continue to operate, and or from the county's perspective. What are you looking at long-term for some of these facilities, and how would you like to be involved in that? The second part is then developing and implementing ways to decrease operating expenses at our facilities to maximize the operational funds. So as we've laid out here a little bit later in the report, we can't just keep looking at the facilities and dumping in funds to, let's say, replace a door when we really need to be looking at lighting. If it costs us $70,000 per year in lighting expenses, if we put in LED lighting or if there's solar panels installed, can we lower those operating costs rather than burdening the user groups in the facilities now? And the way that the agreements are laid out is basically that our user agreements today are responsible for all capital upgrades at the facilities, but there's really no financial support or guidance from the municipalities to get to that point. So we really want to look at what and how we can move that forward. And then in addition, the third approach that we're going to be working on is programming of the facilities. So I think County Council is well aware, if we use the community hall as an example, that it's operating at over a $70,000 a year deficit, and it's utilized less than 30% of the year. So how can we increase usership at the facility and then decrease long-term operating costs? And part of that has to be stemmed from programming at these facilities. So the master plan that we've presented here for your consideration this afternoon is not a statistical analysis. It is not going into different funding frameworks and different models, because every agreement that we have with user groups in Bassano is different, and going in with a one-size-fits-all approach is not the best. It's just not an option, really. So I have worked in other communities, and we have been involved in developing recreation master plans, and we have come in with, the statistical analysis and tried to restructure the tiering and go through grant processes where ag societies get the funds, and then they have to distribute it out to local users and identified facilities that would be closed. And it all came back down to the counties dictating that role with their urban counterparts. And it created, 6 years of trauma between the municipalities. And we've talked about this before, even last year at the presentation. So we've taken a more holistic approach and developed what the philosophy for recreation and leisure truly is. And then now we're going to bridge that through communications with our user groups. So when I say a holistic approach, it's really balancing the human element to recreation and leisure as well as the business side of, yes, we need the statistics, we need to understand the financials, but we don't need to come in up front and say, we're going to change this, 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 and this. We are looking at small incremental changes with regards to recreation and leisure, and that's what we've established over the past 2.5 years, as you'll see in this report. Am I going too fast virtually? Is everybody keeping up with what we're talking about here? There's no one's glazed over? Somebody say something, please.
All good. Keep going.
Okay. So I believe you're aware, because we've talked about this before, the number of user groups and clubs that are in Bassano. However, we've just listed them out here so that you can realize the magnitude of people we're dealing with, and then we can reflect on, from your perspective, you have this with 8 to 10 other communities, so this is nothing new to you. In addition, we've broke down the number of facilities that we specifically have in Bassano that we're working within, and then bridging that again to the recreation users listed above. So with over 50 user groups and community organizations and 15 to 20 facilities, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in it. We're going to just slowly start chipping away at it, items 1 through 3, as we've previously discussed. So we've also outlined in here the plan connectivity. And what that means is that the recreation and leisure plan is not a standalone document. There's a lot of implications on the intermunicipal collaboration framework that we have with the County of Newell. It also ties into the Recreation Funding Committee and grant offerings, the social programming that we're working on with our FCSS department, our infrastructure master plan and capital replacement program, as well as how we're doing urban planning under the municipal development plan. So you may be wondering at this point in time, how have we engaged with the user groups to date to, showcase this master plan? We haven't. Our first key stakeholder in this discussion really is the County of Newell. We would like to present it to you so you can understand our approach, our philosophy, and our implementation proposal to see if there is a level of endorsement that you would be willing to provide as we move forward. Once we know if there's a willing partnership here, then we would like to engage with our user groups in a more wholesome manner to get into the agreement process. So what does that look like from a human resources standpoint? Town Council has approved the addition of 1 full-time administrative staff member. So I do have an assistant now working with us strictly on recreation and leisure, and I've outlined the 3 responsibilities that she that she does with us. So it's bylaw enforcement, the regionalized emergency management, and recreation and culture. So we have at this point in time about 50% of her hours allocated towards recreation and leisure. And then in addition, we will be adding a third full-time public works. So I have summarized here for you in this presentation that we have restructured public works since 2018, and we had upwards of 4 to 5 full-time public works staff with multiple seasonal. We went and we have held it at 2 full-time public works staff for the past 2 years as we worked through the pros and cons of adding another full-time representative and a couple of part-time and or seasonals throughout the year. We have settled on the most cost-effective and appropriate measure of 3 full-time public works staff as well as 1 seasonal. So that's worked into the town's 2021 budget moving forward. And again, we've split the roles and responsibilities of that individual into recreation and leisure at 50% of their time. So as you'll see here, that's roughly $15,500 that we would be looking at to add to our recreation and leisure budget. And then overall, really to recap, is that there's a number of different opportunities that are available to us right now, even for the facilities to hit the reducing the operating costs, but there's cost involved with that. And we will be focusing on applying and utilizing services under the MCCAC grant, which is a climate change action plan, which is under the climate change action plan. So we would like to submit, and we're currently in the process of doing an energy efficiency lighting upgrade at 2 of the facilities. So once we have that application complete, we'll see what we're eligible for, up to $750,000. So that's also good news. And part of this is because we have established the framework for recreation and leisure in Bassano. Are we still doing good?
Amanda, I have a question. Did you say the 2 staff members were already hired?
Correct. Well, the administrative staff is hired. So we had actually brought her in 2020. She was in public works, but with the pandemic, I needed some support internally. And then her role has evolved, and she will be staying on full time with the town. And I mean, not being presumptuous that the county is willing to contribute to that salaried position, but we do need a full-time administrative support staff. So again, not being presumptuous that the county is going to pick that up.
So that was kind of going to be my question. And, you know, not saying that it's right or wrong, but if we compare our working relationship with Bassano, Duchess, and Rosemary, it's kind of different than when we work with the Rolling Hills or a Patricia or a Tilly, because they're hamlets and we have to work with the volunteers that do most of the work. And so when I look at your master plan, where we already spent close to $100,000 on staff for the pool and janitorial services, and then now we're adding, you know, another $25,000 each for staff members that are already hired. And so I just wanted to point that out, that I'm struggling with what to think about that, whether that's the right way to go or not.
Sure. And let me just take a couple of minutes to hopefully answer those questions for you. So let's look at the pool. Let's kind of go around all of the items. So the pool is operated by summer staff only, and they come in for basically 4 months of the year, and then they're out after. And then the facility is completely shut down and inoperable. So this individual is not necessarily going to be doing a whole lot of work with the pool itself, but we do have to do some oversight for the programming to try and maximize the number of people going into it. On the other hand, we have the arena on the other side of the pool that has been completely operated by volunteers, and it sits vacant for 7 months of the year. So the individuals that we need to put into the administrative role, part of that's going to come down to facilitating some form of programming with those recreation and user groups. So that goes back to how are we going to negotiate the user agreements with these individuals? Is that, are we going to try and program them, or are we all as municipalities going to continue to fund deficits at these facilities and not do anything to actually operationalize them. So really what the intent of this individual is to assist us to go from that point of, the user groups are working and they're functional and they might be at a break-even point as, minor hockey, but we still are all paying for the deficits of these facilities. So if nobody comes in to program them, then how are we effectively using taxpayer dollars from the county's perspective and or from the town's perspective? And as one individual, I can't carry all of that on top of everything else that we're doing. So I need some support doing it. And I think that's probably the best way to explain that. I'm not sure if it answers your question fairly, though.
And it does, Amanda, and I kind of understood that there's a lot of work involved, but I'm hoping you kind of see that dilemma between, volunteers in the smaller communities and hiring staff in Bassano, Dutchess, and Rosemary.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, even to expand on that more fully, is that one of the biggest problems that volunteers always bring forward is, we don't have time or the capacity to write these grants or whatever that may be. And it's not to say that we're going to turn around and start writing grants for these organizations after. We need to facilitate the conversation around how are we going to program these facilities? Where do we actually need to bring grants in? Provide strategic direction to these boards, and then look at ways to either cut back some of the resources that we're putting out at the pool, as an example, because hopefully I don't have to have my public works supervisor doing all of the water testing so that we're not paying that same contribution. But at this point in time, we don't have any other option, and we can't bring somebody in from the public to do the water testing at the pool, because it has to be somebody that's certified to provide that level of oversight. So there are a number of areas that we hope to reduce once we get the framework put in place and we redo these user agreements. So the point of the Recreational Leisure Master Plan is to empower the volunteers and not drag them through of, here's another program for you to work on, fill out these voids, and then, hopefully the town of Bassano doesn't fold in 5 years. So we need to create that sustainable operating system. Anything else that I could answer for you? Or did I answer your question?
You did, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you. And to go further with regards to the public works position, that wasn't necessarily asked, but I believe that it's only fair to give you an answer for it. So the facilities that we currently have right now, the town doesn't go around and maintain the exterior of the building, or if there's plumbing issues within them, it's whoever is holding the operating agreement at the time is responsible to bring in a plumber to repair the facilities. But what we have identified throughout this process is that people aren't necessarily fixing the facilities. So if there's a water leak under the kitchen sink, they don't have the funds to do it, so they're just leaving it. And the capital assets that we now all hold, there's problems with them because there is no proper oversight to them. So we can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. And yes, you can enforce that, your volunteer organization needs to maintain the water, but it's not happening. So before we lose the facilities, we need to ensure that we have the manpower and capacity to protect the asset and infrastructure in place now. So that's one of the reasons why moving back to having a third full-time public works individual to assist with facility maintenance is essential. We'd be spending more than this right now just in doing repairs, fixing repairs, if you understand what I'm saying. Is it acceptable to move on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we're kind of all over the board. I feel like before we get into the discussion regarding capital and operating, because we've kind of just talked about it now, are there any specific questions regarding the Recreation and Leisure Master Plan? Like, I didn't anticipate that I would take you through every single section of it today. I was somewhat hoping that you may have read it on your own prior to the meeting.
Yes, Amanda, it's a big document and a lot of work has gone into it, and I don't think you need to take people through it step to step. I think what you've highlighted and what you're going through right now is good. So
Okay.
carry on.
Okay, so we'll get into the funding summary. So currently the town has 3 different funding agreements in place with the County of Newell. So we presented last year a 3-year operating budget at a 50-50 cost share of the approved net deficits. And within the report, I have summarized, where we came in under budget. And again, we'll get to that in a moment. Then we have a 50-50 cost share of recreation under the Recreation Funding Committee. So that's $25,000 contributed equally for the Recreation Funding Committee process. And then finally, we have the multi-year capital plan with upgrades directed and based on the infrastructure master plan at a 50-50 cost share. So that was 2020 to 2023. And I guess one note that I have not identified in here is that in the current ICF, we have a line item under recreation that any capital projects have to be considered by both municipalities and would potentially be at a 50-50 cost share. I am fully aware that the county is working through how to address capital funds from your recreation pot, and we're actually not here today asking for money and figuring out. We're not here today asking for money out of your recreation capital pot, but we are very aware that you're working through that process, and we really wanted to just state in here that depending on where you are in that, we're a willing party to go through that process with you to figure out how you may want to distribute it out, because we're doing a very similar framework proposal on this side. So moving into the capital component, what we would like to suggest this afternoon is that as part of the ICF that we have, if there would be an appetite to have a framework in place where we could have $50,000 in that pool, $25,000 contributed equally by both municipalities, that we could set aside to put towards programs and projects that would reduce operating costs at facilities. So for example, under that MCCAC program I mentioned earlier, we're looking at doing lighting retrofits at 2 of the recreation facilities to decrease the operational expenses. There's going to be a contribution that's required from the municipal side. We are not to that point yet, but we do know that there is funds that we have to contribute to that. Rather than coming into the county after and saying, okay, this is a capital upgrade that we're looking at that we did not discuss in 2020, if there was a framework that we could work on specifically for reducing operating costs that's beneficial to both parties without delaying approvals between two to 3 or 4 council meetings, we would like to propose that for your consideration. And in doing that, I've highlighted here that in 2020, the county incurred a savings of the $61,000 based on unspent operating and capital costs. So it may not necessarily impact your 2021 budget. What would you think about having some sort of program like that?
Thoughts? Brian and Clarence?
Well, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with stuff like those when it comes to the definition between capital and operating, because some of those things, you got to change a light bulb. Well, it's an operating expense. It's not a capital expense. I realize when you're doing a facility, maybe it falls into a different category, and that's not why I'm making that comment. It's mostly just to get a greater understanding of the capital versus the operating component. And I applaud you for $61,000 saved, regardless of whether that was because COVID or in spite of it. So I think it's good to look at it that way. I guess for me it's I'm having trouble defining that operating capital component.
Thank you. So Brian, one of the things that we could do if we were to develop a framework is to clearly define what operating and capital is. So similarly, in the Recreation Funding Committee process, that's what we had developed with the committee, is we defined exactly what capital meant, because organizations cannot apply to the Recreation Funding Committee for any capital projects. It's only operating. So we could develop that same sort of framework that could be approved between the two councils that administratively we could manage if that was appropriate for both organizations. And then that eliminates, you know, are you replacing a light bulb or are you doing the complete lighting fixture, etc. Would that be appropriate from your perspective?
I think so. That's a concept that makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you for your question.
Clarence?
First of all, Amanda, I want to say I really appreciate your openness, your honesty, and coming forward and laying it all out on the table. I really appreciate that. And as you know, we're working with our own recreation and capital and operating and how we're going to do that. And none of us have all the answers, and some of us don't have very many at all. So recreation, I think we do believe that it has to be supported to some extent by municipalities. What that is, I mean, that's something that you have to work out together. And quite frankly, I'm not sure we even are all on the same page at the county level. So it's a big topic. I've struggled with trying to understand, because operating something like the town of Bassano is totally different than what I'm familiar with in Rolling Hills. So, and we, as you know, have all kinds of recreation facilities that perhaps it could be argued that a small 600-person community shouldn't even be trying to do. But I think, you know, and those discussions have to take place. And I see a lot of things happening in Bassano. I see a lot of similarities. Life moves on and people move on and priorities change, and all those things enter into this thing. But I think the openness is absolutely refreshing. And I really want to think that we have to continue with that. The one question I have, and I struggled with it because we struggle with it even ourselves, we have to have buy-in from the people that use it. And the people that use it also have to have skin in the game. And I see it, and I don't know if I'm just missing it, but I see it sort of missing in parts of, especially when I look at capital, I see it missing. And I think we have to come to some kind of understanding and common philosophy. And what do the users have to throw into capital?
Now I'm eager to respond to you. May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the kind words, and I'm glad that the openness is appreciated. I mean, we believe that you can't go into negotiations and you can't have a partnership if there's lack of communication. To your point about perhaps we're missing the capital contribution, I think part of the defining factor here is that we're only seeing where we're responsible under the current operating agreements with the user groups. So for example, the curling club is fundraising to do a new condenser, and that condenser is over $140,000. At this point in time, their skin in the game is they've raised, I believe, about $90,000 towards that, and they have not come to the municipalities for any capital investment. But we don't even have an established framework regarding that to even provide an option for discussion. So part of this entire recreation and leisure master plan implementation is allowing us that capacity to develop those frameworks so that we can clearly come back to you and say, okay, are we prepared to sit down at the table and look at what percentage is each party responsible for? Because there is the philosophy that, you know, if you're a curling club, as an example, if you want to run that curling club, then you figure out what your fees are to manage the entire facility and every aspect related to curling in general and that building is just there for you. So we'll give you basically the skin of the building and you do the rest of it. That's not established today, and you're absolutely right, Clarence, that's not outlined here because we aren't even at that stage yet. If we look at it further and we talk about the pool as an example, we start looking at the capital expenses of the Bassano outdoor pool. The difference with that is that the town owns the pool and we do all of the operations and management of it. So there is no user group or entity that is paying that cost. Whereas on the arena side, let's say they're looking for a new Zamboni, hockey is covering the expenses for the Zamboni. So what is that balance that we need to find to ensure that all stakeholders are fairly represented? And that doesn't necessarily mean a 1/3 split, but that there is a level of equity that you can take back. And I think that's why it appears as though there's a gap in this presentation, is because we haven't established that to bring back to you and say, these groups have contributed X amount to capital. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I don't think we at the county we have some ideas on how that should work, not just with you, but with our own areas. And so I think it has to be, whatever there is, it has to be, our philosophies have to have some consistency.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right.
And those discussions have to take place also.
You're absolutely right with that. And, one of the ways that we could even discuss that today or at a later meeting is that whole willing partnership between the two is, we've seen that you're developing a framework. We're also developing a framework. There needs to be an area to pilot that. So we've already established that collectively, that we're willing to do that. And if it needs to come back to, here's a 1-page summary of the curling club as an example. And let's factually look at how that facility is operating. And then, if we want to talk about how is capital funded or how is programming funded over there, we have one facility that is evidence-based for you to make a decision on. And that's an improvement rather than us all looking at, 75 facilities and say, how do we make this work everywhere? Let's pick one and figure out how to make it work at that facility and then evaluate it on the adjacent facilities. That's an example. I mean, it's going to take some time to do it, but we all need to enter those discussions because at a local level, recreation is part of what attracts and maintains families and economic development, and understanding that soft side versus the hard side being infrastructure that most municipalities and even counties are familiar with, like roads and bridges. We've got roads and underground infrastructure. That's a priority. Great to have it, but if you don't have a framework in a community to sustain it, what's the point in having it? So we do have to look at it from a softer side to sustain our communities.
Agreed. Okay, where are we at here? Amanda, have you hit the highlights?
Never. Oh my goodness, I'm way past my timeline. I'm so sorry. When would you like to be done? 10 minutes ago?
No, okay, it's 12:13. How about we say in 10 minutes we need to be done?
Okay.
We have 1 o'clock delegations.
Nobody threw up their checkered flag and said you're done. We just all kept talking. So I'll buzz through this and hopefully we can answer any of your extra questions. So we were on page 10 under 2021 operating. So I have presented here for council's consideration that there is a difference in the 2021 operating budget of $36,000. That was laid out throughout the presentation earlier, and it includes an increase in insurance premiums. Unfortunately, we have no control over that. There's an increase in the power charges with the carbon tax, and then there's the staff complement from the administrative and public works side. So that is summarized for you in here. If there were any questions, I mean, we can look at that again, is that we did incur a $61,000 savings last year that was unspent funds. It's not our intent to maximize out our budgets. That's not how we operate here. We look for efficiencies all the time. If there are any questions, please ask them. In addition, I've provided Matt with a detailed line-by-line budget for each one of the departments that, you know, we can answer any questions to that. So I guess really our request out of the presentation today is seeking an endorsement on the Recreation and Leisure Master Plan so that we can actually begin the consultation process with our recreation and culture groups. We're also seeking that the recreation facility and efficiency project framework is developed where we would do a $25,000 cost share, but develop a framework that we could work from to do those energy efficiency upgrades. And then finally, there is an amendment to the 2021 budget, so we are presenting that for your consideration as well today. Moving on, if you're not looking for an update regarding 2021 recreation objectives, they're laid out for you here, and I probably don't need to go through them line by line. So may I ask if you have any questions?
Kelly?
This one just came to me when I was looking at this little graph. Hi, Amanda, by the way. Hi, Irv. Airport. How does that fall into our recreation when it's actually transportation?
Well, I guess that's something that could probably be debated, but recreation has been used here at our airport specifically because it is a recreational flying club. Yes, there is some transportation that happens out there, but we also have a lot of recreational flyers.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So may I ask, is there an appetite to provide an endorsement for the Recreation and Leisure Master Plan?
Anybody have a response to that? My response would be that I sort of like to have a council discussion for one thing, which we would have to do later, not right at the moment. And I guess I'd also like to know what the plan would be. Let's say it was endorsed, how would we move it forward with our residents? Is there a plan for that?
Yep, so the first thing that would be is if there is an endorsement from the county council's perspective, the first thing that we would be doing is establishing what the framework is to enter discussions to upgrade and update the user agreements. And I believe prior to doing that, it would be useful for our two administrations to sit down and look at what are the needs of the county, what are the needs of the town, how can we join those before we enter the discussion with the user groups.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Brian?
And I need some clarification on it, going back to the ICF and how that is, how that's laid out in the operating component of our funding. And it was my impression or my understanding that it's a 5-year rolling average, and that you know, that it would, if it's going to creep, it would creep based on the 5-year average of the previous 5 years. So Matt or even Amanda, if you could highlight that for me, maybe I'm out of line here, but that was my understanding.
I'll take that one. Our ICF with the town of Bassano is a 50-50 cost share based on approved operational budget. So the budget that we had approved at the county and is included in our 2021 final budget on what page is it here? Page 10 of 12, your 2021 projected column that totals to 154,903. That is what is currently approved. Amanda and the town is here seeking, I guess you'd call it a budget amendment for the additional staff. But currently we're operating off that 154,000 number. So it's a little bit different than what we've got in place with the village of Dutchess, which was based on that 5-year historical average and then is a fixed amount and just inflates each year.
Okay, so that helps because that's where I was confused. I thought that those agreements were basically a mirror image of each other. So, but thanks, Matt.
Wayne?
That 154,903 is for operations. What have we got for agreement for capital costs?
Yeah, so if you recall, Amanda was in front of council earlier last year and presented I think it was a 5-year capital plan that council had approved. So 2021, I think we're looking at around 60,000 plus the carry forward for the boiler, if I remember right, from 2020. And then in 2022 and 2023, we've got $10,000 approved in each year. And the specific projects escape me, but Amanda might be able to speak to those.
I can, yep. And those projects as well they're outlined here in the report. I didn't outline them here in the report, my apologies. So we're working on a fire alarm system upgrade, and then we've got pumps that needs to be replaced at 2 facilities. So not major upgrades in the following 22-23 year.
Kelly?
And if I may add, just for clarification to council, those are capital projects operated by the town of Bassano. We don't have any agreement with the town on capital projects that are operated by volunteers within the town, okay? Just wanted to clarify that point.
Bree?
Yeah, and I do like your master plan and the way you explained it, Amanda. I will need a bit of time. I don't feel comfortable endorsing it now because an endorsement means the financial consequences too. And I would like to see us discuss this as a council a bit more before we endorse it.
Thank you for that. And I will just note that because the financial outlay of this is going to be dependent on what we can negotiate on user agreements, the framework is discussing the philosophy of how we will approach recreation and leisure in the town. And once we have the endorsement on that, it will allow us to bring back evidence-based facts for county council for consideration. And I believe that's where the 2 administrations will need to collaborate prior to entering those discussions to look at what does it mean to rewrite these agreements and how will that impact both organizations. So I believe it would be even difficult at this point in time to say collectively from county council or Bassano town council, by endorsing this plan, it means that we are incurring an additional $250,000 because that's really not the intent of what we're going at. And I hope that just provides a little clarification as you have discussions later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that as a council, we promote, encourage, and think that planning is very important and the work that's gone into it is important and appreciated. But we do need some time, as I mentioned, to have our own discussion and own look at it. And I'm wondering, as we need to wrap up, is there anything else that people have questions about or that you want to finish off with? Amanda, or Ellen has a question first.
Amanda, I'm just wondering if for the 15 to 20 facilities, and I think you brushed on it earlier, but is there any user statistics available? Did you look at that percentage at all before you started the master plan?
Yeah, so we have been assessing what we have for statistics on some of these facilities. And part of the statistics that we're gathering also has come out of the Recreation Funding Committee grant application. When we established that process, we asked people to provide the number of users that they are servicing based on their programs. So we are starting to actually collect data to create evidence for these facilities. I can use the community hall as a simple example because we do all of the rentals out of the town office. So I have the actual data on that at, you know, roughly 30% usage.
I've been having problems with my screen this morning, so I turned my camera off, just so you know, occasionally, and it seems to help. Any other questions for Amanda, or you can wrap up, Amanda?
No, Irv and I are done. We'll thank you for your time and apologize for running late, but again, nobody waved the checkered flag. We just kept talking. So I hope that you did gather enough information from what we've presented, and happy to give any additional comments at a later date after you've had time to, you know, strip it apart on your own. So thank you.
Yes, and as Clarence pointed out, Amanda, we appreciate you and Irv coming here and your transparency, your openness, your everything, all the work you put into this. It's great, and good to hear that you and Matt are communicating, because we'll probably be asking Matt questions that he will be able to answer because he is communicating with you. So thank you, and back to Irv.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again for all that, and just to be noteworthy, you know, any dealings that we have with the public here when it comes to funding and stuff like that, and any funding that you guys provide to this, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the number one thing that comes out of my mouth is that the county helps us a lot. Not just helps us a lot, they support everything that we do so far, and some people don't even know that, to be quite honest, and until it's asked, and when we tell them that, they're very happy about that as well. So I just wanted to pass that on and tell you that we respect your help a lot too. It's just the way it is, and we're glad to be getting along so well.
And we appreciate you getting that information out too, because there's always misunderstanding, and facts are good, and appreciation is important, acknowledgement. So, all right, gang, we will let Irv and Amanda move on, and we'll move on and get back, because we do have 1 o'clock delegation. I hear an echo, and I don't know if that's me or you. All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Irv and Amanda.